The BC government keeps telling us there's plenty of timber. So why do mills keep shutting down? It's because the numbers government uses to decide how much wood can be cut, the AAC, have nothing to do with the actual forest on the ground. They're financial numbers. They live on spreadsheets, not in forests. And here's the part nobody talks about. Big companies can make money twice off the same forest. A business model only possible if nobody asks too many questions. First, they make money cutting the trees. Then, after the valuable timber is gone, they can sell the logging rights for millions because those rights are treated as valuable corporate assets, not public resources. That's why the AAC, the allowable annual cut, stays inflated. It props up balance sheets and leaves communities holding the bag. Let me show you exactly how the double dip works and why towns like Mackenzie paid the price. Before I get into the details, here's the quick and dirty version of how the whole thing works. 7 steps, 2 minutes. And once you see this, the rest of the story will make a lot of sense and be a lot harder to ignore. Number 1, companies get 5-year forest licenses, rights to harvest crown timber in a specific area. And most of those licenses get automatically renewed every 5 years, so they become long-term rights. Number 2, those licenses are listed as major financial assets on corporate balance sheets, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Number 3, the allowable annual cut, or AAC, is the official government number that says how much timber can be cut each year from that area. Number 4, the higher that AAC, the more valuable the license looks on company financial statements. 5, if the AAC were reduced to match the real timber supply, which is lower, the license would drop in value and companies would have to record big losses. 6, instead, when timber becomes hard to find or uneconomic, companies close mills and can sell the license while the paper value is still high. Later, I'll show you an example of a company that did this. Number 7, communities lose the jobs and the mill. The company walks away with cash from selling a license for public land. Here's the part almost nobody outside the boardroom understands. Even if they don't sell the license, because the province keeps the AAC high, companies benefit from its value on their balance sheet. Because shareholder equity, in other words, the company's net worth, stays high and they can borrow money based on the value of the assets they hold. Their balance sheet looks attractive to banks and lenders, which in this system seems to matter more than whether a town or a forest survives. When the AAC is kept high, the license looks valuable even when a high percentage of the viable timber is gone. Companies have a huge incentive to lobby government to keep the AAC artificially inflated. That's the core of this video. Now let's unpack it so you can see exactly how the pieces fit together. The AAC is simply the number the province sets for how much timber can be cut each year in a certain area. It's supposed to reflect how much the forest can handle over time. But for the past 2 decades, it's been higher than the actual timber cut, sometimes dramatically higher. You can see the huge difference by the end of 2024. The actual cut was 29 million cubic meters less than the AAC. I've been wondering why the AAC inflation persisted, and the ministry defended inflated numbers and companies lobby for high AAC, why nobody corrected the models, and why First Nations are buying overvalued licenses. And here's the strange part, the part most people never hear. Even though forest licenses are just rights to cut trees on public land, BC lets companies buy, sell, and trade these licenses, often for tens of millions of dollars, as if they were property. And on their financial statements, licenses show up as assets, right alongside mills and equipment. Let's look at some examples. Canfor's public financial statements show in 2019, timber licenses worth 445.7 million Canadian dollars. In 2024, 323 million. And it's interesting to note that's a drop of about 123 million in 5 years. Here's Interforest timber license assets for 2024 at 158.9 million Canadian dollars. And West Fraser's licenses listed under current assets in 2024, alongside property, plant, and equipment at a value for both types of assets at 4.2 billion US dollars. Those numbers are not just paper, though. They quietly affect how strong the company looks to banks, how investors judge its health, and how much debt it can comfortably carry. The AAC matters here because it tells you how much timber is officially linked to those licenses. In past government take-back initiatives, the way forest licenses were valued for compensation was to use the on-the-books asset value of the license, which is determined by ascribing a market value to the respective allowable annual cut. So if the AAC goes down, so does the asset value, and therefore the shareholder equity on the balance sheet. Higher AAC, and the license looks like it gives access to more timber, it looks more valuable. Lower AAC, the license looks like it gives access to less timber, its value falls. When license value falls, equity falls, and debt to equity ratios get worse, which is exactly what companies and lenders don't want. If this all sounds abstract, let me show you what it looks like in real life, in a town that paid the price. Let's look at the Mackenzie timber supply area because it shows this scenario clearly. Here's what happened. 2019, Canfor shut down its Mackenzie sawmill, citing fiber supply problems. And here's the truth. If the fiber was really there, they would have kept the sawmill running. Then the Mackenzie assets were sold. The mill site and equipment and the Mackenzie forest tenure, the license to harvest in that region, the total sale price was 66.5 million. Two First Nations, McLeod Lake Indian Band and Say Dene Nation, bought the tenure. In its financial statements, Canfor removed the cost of that license from its books and recorded about 34.9 million as a gain on the transaction. That's accounting language for we sold it for more than its remaining book value. So on the ground, the town lost its mill, over 400 workers lost direct jobs, plus hundreds more contractors, truckers, and local businesses that depended on that mill. But on the books, the company made a profit on the sale of the asset, including the license to cut in that area. You'd think companies would lose money when the timber runs out. You'd think the ministry would lower the AAC to match reality. You'd think the system would protect mill towns. No. The system protects the license value, and the community is an afterthought. So is this the reason the AAC stayed high for decades? It certainly wasn't sustainability. Seems more likely it was for balance sheets. It helped to stop the companies from taking massive financial losses as timber runs out. And when the fiber finally collapses, they can bail out by selling the tenure. So when a big company cashes out, who's writing the check? That's where the story gets even stranger because the buyers aren't who you'd expect. Or maybe they are. Let's take a look at who's on the other side of the deal. They're often stepping into a market where the prices are held up by inflated AAC numbers. Not because the fiber is truly there, but because the licenses still look valuable on paper. There are three main buyers for tenures. Number one, First Nations. Increasingly the largest category. For example, the McLeod Lake Indian Band and the Say Dene buying Canfor's Mackenzie tenure. And in 2019-2020, the Huayat First Nation increasing ownership over the old TFL 44 on Vancouver Island. Number two, community forests and smaller BC licensees. Sometimes local coalitions buy tenures. Keep in mind, community forests use public money to buy back public logging rights that private corporations were allowed to sell. That's a whole other rabbit hole. Number three, tenure swaps between big companies. Canfor, West Fraser, and Interfor have traded tenures. There's a whole second market in licenses to cut crown timber. That market, the ability to sell licenses, depends heavily on the AAC number staying high enough to make those licenses look valuable. To really understand why the AAC stays inflated, you have to follow the money and see who's actually winning. Most of the tenures in BC are controlled by about 10 big companies. 3 of the biggest are Canfor, West Fraser, and Interfor, and they are held by BC billionaires like Jimmy Pattison, Canadian banks and asset managers, US and European funds, and in some cases, offshore foundations in odd little places like Liechtenstein. Their main obligation is protect shareholder value and keep the numbers looking good, not log sustainably or keep the mill in Mackenzie or Houston or Crofton open to support local jobs. That's the reality behind BC forestry. Accountability flows upward to shareholders, not outward to communities. Now, the Council of Forest Industries constantly lobbies the government along with private companies. You can look it up online on the BC Lobbyists Registry. This registry just shows the official meetings. MLAs and bureaucrats also attend industry receptions, luncheons, and fishing trips. Check out this photo of former Chief Forester Diane Nichols on a fishing trip with big forestry company head honchos. The Chief Forester is the person who sets the AAC in BC. A federal MP once told me that he spends way too much time at lobbyist receptions. He said, "I eat way too much shrimp." That's politics for you. The seafood is abundant, the accountability is not. So, government understands the balance sheet value of a high AAC. Keeping the AAC high doesn't protect your communities, it protects the license value. The AAC isn't science or sustainability, it's accounting on behalf of multinational corporations. But the people who pay the price are the people in mill towns. Who's really running the forests and mills in BC? Back in 2019, I chatted with Minister of Forests, Doug Donaldson, at a reception. I explained how shocked I was to find out about the gross mismanagement of BC's forests and that things needed to change. And he said, "I know things need to change. We're up against powerful forces." Who was he actually talking about? It's not really a mystery. They're the owners and investors behind the companies holding the licenses. So who actually owns BC's forests in practice? Not the people who live there, but global investors who treat mills the way hedge funds treat apartment blocks. They are financial instruments, not community anchors. Most BC mills aren't local family mills anymore. They're global financial assets. Remember Liechtenstein? It's a tax haven country where wealthy families and companies set up foundations to quietly own stuff. So when George Carlin says this,
because they own this place, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
That club controls the capital behind the companies that run BC's forests, policies, and political decisions. They can pressure management for payouts even as wood supply collapses. That translates into cutting more than forests can sustain in order to maintain cash flow, pushing for subsidies and bailouts from the government, and lobbying against reforms that would shrink the AAC. That defeatist attitude by our political reps is a big problem, because when they throw up their hands and say we're up against powerful forces, they're essentially admitting they've stopped fighting for the people they represent. And that defeatist mindset leaves Canadians unprotected, while private interests, including billionaires, offshore investors, and multinational companies, make the real decisions about our forests. If elected officials convince themselves that change is impossible, then nothing changes. And in a system already built to serve industry over communities, political resignation isn't neutral. It's an active advantage for the people who profit from the status quo. All this is why mills closed and will keep closing. The timber is depleted, but the licenses still make money, and the incentives to pretend the timber isn't depleted are still very much alive. The AAC protects the balance sheets, not forests, not workers, not towns. And until we fix the system, we're going to keep watching profitable companies walk away while communities crumble. And anyone who thinks these companies care about the First Nations who are buying the tenures is kidding themselves. The only thing those companies care about is offloading risk and protecting their balance sheets. So how do we fix this if these international forces are so powerful and so faceless? There have to be thousands of people across BC who understand what's really going on and then speaking up for a new system of forest management. But here's the catch. We can't make vague demands. Save old growth or do better forest management means nothing to government. They'll just create another feel-good program like the so-called old growth deferrals that lets them pretend they're fixing things while everything continues exactly as before. That's why we built the new Forest Act framework. It hard codes 3 priorities into law: ecological integrity, community-based decision-making, and community economies. It's a foundation for real legislation, not industry PR. And it gets specific about the things that actually change outcomes: how cut levels are set, how local decision-making works, how regions rebuild value-added industries, how forests are treated as critical infrastructure, and how public oversight replaces corporate self-policing. Ecological integrity means you don't push a forest past the point where it can repair itself. The water, soil, wildlife, and trees keep functioning as a whole system, not a plantation running on fumes. When a forest has integrity, it keeps its natural processes, its biodiversity, and its ability to renew itself long into the future. Monoculture tree plantations don't do that. They grow fiber, not forests. And here's what that means for policy. No more vague promises, no more cosmetic reforms. The new Forest Act framework gives BC a clear, workable blueprint so forest management doesn't keep decimating ecosystems and hollowing out communities. You can find a link in the description. So as the big companies continue to pull out, we have to fill the gap with what benefits BC, not Liechtenstein. Stewardship means protecting forests and the dignity of the human communities tied to them. The current system does neither, but the new Forest Act can.